Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. For this presentation, I am Tuan Nurul Ifa binti Tuan Ismail and my partner Nur Fadlin Adila binti Zulkifli will be presenting on the topic ethical egoism. Before we go further, these are the contents that we will be explaining for this topic, which is definition, individual ethical egoism, universal ethical egoism, common goal, universality and social harmony, short-term versus long-term interest, and also moral dilemma. So what is meant by ethical egoism? Basically, ethical egoism is the normative ethical position that the moral agents out to act in their own self-interest. So ethical egoism can be divided into two categories, which is individual and also universal. So individual ethical egoism is that ethical egoists would hold that all people should do whatever that benefits my, which is the individual self-interest, and the universal ethical egoism would argue that everyone should act in ways that are in their self-interest. Alright, so as I have said before, an individual ethical egoist would hold that all people should do whatever that benefits my, which is the individual itself, self-interest. It maintains that everyone ought to do what is in the overall self-interest of one's individuals. And at this part, ethical egoism is the prescriptive doctrine that all people should serve my self-interest, which is their self-interest. And for example, given in the presentation is the dialogue provided whereby I ought to be concerned about others only to the extent that this concern contributes to my own self-interest. And the second dialogue is I ought to look out only for my own interest.
So we move to the next part, which is universal ethical egoism. In this context, people ought to help others only when and to the extent that it is in their own best interest to do so. That means universal ethical egoism is the idea that everyone ought to seek their own self-interest, not just themselves only, but includes everyone. For example, many religious people do good because they believe there is a God, a heaven, and also a hell. It is right to help others because it is usually in your self-interest to help them, or even religious morality seems to be based on self-interest. As we know, everyone seeks what is most serviceable to himself. If you know what is good, you will always act in a way to achieve it, as well as if you act in such a way that is not conducive to your good, then you must have been mistaken. The ethical egoist recognizes that the only thing you own is your life. It is said that there is nothing wrong with being selfish or self-interested because you are nurturing your only real possession. Those who tell you otherwise are probably trying to manipulate you to get what they want. So we proceed to the other part, which is common goal in ethical egoism. Firstly, it is also important to see that ethical egoists can live disciplined life. It is mean that I give all of you example. Most ethical egoists will attempt to stop smoking because they recognize smoking is not in their long-term interest and is therefore bad. Ethical egoism does not support doing whatever you feel. Rather, it encourages you to follow your objective and rational self-interest. Secondly, the common goal in ethical egoism is to make moral judgments. For example, most ethical egoists will judge the murderer as wrong because it is rarely in one's long-term self-interest to murder. There is, after all, a chance you will get caught and end up in prison, or maybe some God will send you to hell for murder. Next, encourage self-awareness. If you can know yourself and what you need, then it is easier to stay productive in modern society. For instance, the benefit of having this trait is one's life include a higher level of emotional intelligence, greater listening and empathy skills, along improve critical thinking. This combination of factors allows for better decision to be made, which leads to stronger communication and better relationships. Lastly, no one can manipulate you because you become entirely immune to the idea of having someone take advantage of you when society practices ethical egoism. The people who use others to advance their personal agendas will no longer have the option to make others do favors for them that push their journey forward. This also means that others will no longer have the option to guilt you into taking action that you don't want to do. You are spending more time on the things in life that you enjoy doing yourself.
Alright, next is universality and social harmony. At this point, we can understand that people trade in some freedom for the benefits that come out of cooperative living. If we see this, it is also related to self-interest because even though they sacrifice their freedom, it is actually still for their own self-interest. So, in this part, it can be divided into explicit and also implicit. What is explicit and what is implicit? So, let me give some examples. As explicit contract is a person who has agreed to follow. So, in this explicit matter, for example, is immigrants who come to Malaysia and work at our country. So, if we look at these people, they agreed to follow the rules and regulations in Malaysia in order to fulfill their self-interest by working here and also sacrifice their freedom rather than being in their own country. So in Malaysia, they need to follow the rules and regulations that is set up by our government. In other way, implicit contracts is when a person has never agreed to but find himself in. For example, we as natural-born citizens of Malaysia have never agreed to follow Malaysian law, but then we can fit ourselves in our own country. Both parties still enjoy the benefits given and can live peacefully in a safe country.
We continue to the next point, which is long-term interest versus short-term interest in ethical egoism. The meaning of long-term interest is may require a lifetime or long journey. Long-term self-interest could be motivated by ourselves. I give all of you one situation where you are going to university or college. It is one of your self-interest. In pursuing your self-interest, you will get a job later on. It is in our own interest to look to our long-term interest by the effects of our action on the other people as a group. Next, for short-term interest, the concern is that happen in a short period of time only. Short-term decisions may seem good at a time but may be detrimental to a person's long-term outlook. For example, stealing is not in their long-term self-interest and is therefore bad. Or for sure, someone will be sent into a jail for his wrong action.
Another objection is that what the argument state is not always true. Consider this example, the prisoner's dilemma. For instance, this is a hypothetical situation described in a game theory. So, the situation is between you and your comrade, let's call him X. And you and X are being in a prison, and both were asked to confess. The terms of the deal you are offered are as follows. The first one, if you confess and X doesn't confess, you get 6 months of jail and he gets 10 years. The second situation is when X confesses and you don't, he gets 6 months of jail and you get 10 years. The third situation is if both of you confess, you both got 5 years only in prison, but if neither of you confesses, both of you get 10 years of jail. Regardless of what X does, the best thing for you to do is to confess, because if he doesn't confess, you'll get a light sentence, and if he does confess, you'll at least avoid getting extra prison time. But the same reasoning holds for X as well. According to ethical egoism, You should both pursue your rational self-interest, but then the outcome is not the best of one possible. You both get 5 years in prison if both confessed, whereby if both of you had put your self-interest on hold, you each only get 2 years in prison. The point of this is very simple. It isn't always in your best interest to pursue your own self-interest without concern for others. Sacrificing your own interest for the good of others denies the fundamental value of your own life to yourself. For that is all about our topic today, ethical egoism. If you have any questions, you can directly contact us for further explanation. You can contact me or Sister Fadlin. So that's all for this presentation. Thank you.